All right, welcome back to the War Room. I'm here with Karsten calling in from Puerto Rico. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
We
Get
are
a little
officially a global
vacation.
show. Look at us.
Absolutely.
We're a
I mean,
global
it's
show.
still it is technically still the United States. Um, but yeah.
Dadgummit, Karsten, you having geography knowledge.
What
Well,
is it, a
anywho,
territory? Yeah.
I don't even know, dude. That's beyond my scope of geography.
Here's what I tell you, you don't have to have a passport if you're coming from the US. So
Okay.
it's qualified enough.
Yeah. There was like a big fumble or something like that in the NFL today, and it just kept squirting out or whatever. And someone said they're running the annexation to Puerto Rico over there. That's funny to bring that up. That's one of the funniest names for a trick play ever. But yeah, back to talk about some F1 stuff today. Really, more or less, wrap up the 2023 season. And last we left off, we were previewing the Brazil Grand Prix, which ended up being a lot better than we expected. Or I say we kind of predicted some hype around it, but other people were just like, oh, it's gonna be mid. It definitely had a cool ending. So yeah, going to kind of look at the last three races of the season, then kind of go into looking at the season as a whole, and then what's to come in the future. So strap on, you're in for a good one. So yeah, just kind of we kind of know what happened. Everyone kind of knows what happened in the last three races in terms of wins and stuff like that. But of the three races in the back end of this season that we finished with, Karsten, what was kind of your favorite? I guess what was your favorite race that you saw? What surprised you? What were some of your favorite moments?
I really liked Brazil because Lando did well. I'm obviously a
True.
big Lando fan, so I like to see that. So that was a highlight, and then a low light would have been him. What was it, like the first lap of Vegas? First couple laps, got his wing knocked off, and he's out. So those are my highlights and lowlights, represented by Lando's finishing of races. But
Very explainable. Yeah, makes sense.
yeah, and then I like to see Las Vegas turn out actually to be a good event, because everybody was hating on us over here in the U.S. all across Twitter and all other social media platforms. So I like that.
100%. I mean, to touch on Brazil real quick, I think the other thing that everyone just absolutely loved was that last. I mean, really, the last third of the race battle between Alonso and Checo. Right. I mean, it was just phenomenal. I mean, both drivers did a phenomenal job. Checo had to hunt Alonso down. I think he was down 25 seconds or more with like a third of the race to go or whatever. He catches up to him. Looks like he can make a move on him. And Fernando was taking some interesting lines coming out of the second to last turn. And he was really, I mean, just playing it really, really well. I mean, he's 42 years old. He's got some gray in his beard and stuff like that. So he knows how to defend really well. He was just putting on a masterclass. To get a little bit detailed, if you go back and watch his entrance and exit line going into, I believe, the second to last turn, the short corner, kind of 90 degree with a little bit of banking, he wasn't taking the traditional ideal line. He was almost like spinning it around the outside line where there was a little more banking, to force Perez to kind of dive down the inside to try to get a little less dirty air. But two, by taking that outside line instead of the ideal line, he was actually maintaining a little bit more speed that way and able to get better traction and launch out of that corner onto the big long straight at the start-finish line that has the DRS zone. And with him being on older tires, that really helped him defend that position and prevent Sergio from overtaking him on that start-finish straight. But yeah, we saw, Perez get past Alonso with one lap to go, and then we're like, oh, it's over, whatever. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, wait, Fernando's still there. He's got DRS. And then sent it down. I believe he sent it around the outside, I believe, on that first DRS zone, I think. Or was it down the – yeah, because I think Perez covered the insides, and he predicted he was going to go that way. So he faked on the inside. Perez covered, then he went around the outside, and then was later braking than Checo going into that corner, was able to take the line. So just exhilarating, not to mention that Perez still had a chance to pass him at the start-finish straight. in the final DRS zone, and it was literally like 0.0001 of a second, and like it was a literal photo finish. I honestly did not know who got the last podium spot at that race. It was just phenomenal. But so I think Brazil was awesome compared to most other races this season.
Yeah.
But I totally agree with you. I wanted Vegas to work so bad because I liked just the layout. I liked that it was a night race. I liked that they were going down the strip. I looked at that track and I was like, it could kind of be like a Baku where you have all these super long straightaways with DRS zones, and then the majority of your corners are low speed corners. So it makes it to where if someone gets past, they don't have as much dirty air to fight in the turns following directly after, and maybe they can hang with them.
Uh-huh.
And the race spoke for itself. Obviously, we had some issues with like free practice, everything where a storm drain almost torpedoed Carlos Sainz's car beyond recognition, which was pretty crazy. But I know I already got your opinion on this, but when you're looking at a race that had 99 overtakes on a dry surface and 4 lead changes between Max, Checo, and Leclerc, so one of those cars not being of the same manufacturer, I'd say, well, I'll ask you the question. Do you think it was the second best race of the season or the best race of the season? I think it's between that and Singapore, but what was your opinion and what was like your favorite moments from that race? Obviously, you didn't like Lando going down, but once you were able to kind of grieve from that over the course of the safety car laps, were you able to kind of, enjoy the rest of the race, or were you just too depressed to go on?
No, I still thought it was a great race. I mean, the thing is, like, the whole point of racing is for everybody to come into it and have an opportunity to win, And, like,
Mhm.
if you can't pass and there's not a lot of passing going on and everybody's just kind of playing follow the leader the whole time, then it doesn't make for that entertaining of a race. And so anytime that we've got a situation where you don't know what's going to happen next and it makes it so much more captivating, it's such a good race. It's so much better. And yeah, like I said, I'm so glad that it went well because it had to. I mean, if you just think about it, like Vegas as a city, having a street race there down the strip and everything. I mean, you want that to work, because it
Yep.
just it just seems like it would fit so perfectly, and it's good for Vegas, obviously, but that's the United States. It's good for you know it's an American win, I would call it. And
Yeah.
so if the racing is good, then it's probably going to happen again because then the fans like it. So yeah,
Mhm.
just the amount of passing going on, and to see once again another couple drivers in the lead for a little while. Also very exciting this season. Not something we get to see that often. A true treat, if you will,
Absolutely.
for us spectators. So, yeah, and obviously there was a moment there where there was potential for Checo to win, and he's one of the other ones that I really pulled for. I like the second guys on teams sometimes, like the
Mhm.
Checos and the George Russells and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I enjoyed seeing him lead for a little while.
Well, one last question on the Vegas Grand Prix. You talk about Checo having a chance to win, and of course Max ended up winning it, and he had a chance to win even from dealing with a big penalty. But a lot of people are talking about the question of, did Ferrari screw Charles Leclerc with another terrible race strategy call again with that safety car? Because he was the lead car,
Yep.
Checo and Max were behind, and they all had an opportunity to go in and pit for new tires, and Leclerc stayed out. The other two went in for fresh tires, had I think at least a 9-lap advantage, if I remember correctly. And obviously none of them were going to lose track position from pitting. So I mean, obviously, I think if Leclerc would have got new tires, and maybe the other two or one of the other two would have stayed out to try to put him in a Red Bull sandwich. But I don't know. I don't know if there's a correct call, but I don't know if their call was the correct one. But what did you think? I mean, if you were Ferrari, do you think leaving him out was the best call? Because it obviously really screwed him up in the back half of the race.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can, what is it, Monday quarterback it and say they
Yeah.
made the wrong choice and they obviously should have brought him in, but I don't know. It's like you know, you would think with all the technology and information that they have, and maybe part of it is see what the other team is going to do, and then we'll make a move based on that. So there could be, like in poker, you've got, a clear statistical odds of winning at any point, but it also has to do with what the other person does, right? So if
Hmm.
they make this move, we make that move kind of thing. And so I don't know, you would think like they would have sort of like a game plan laid out of like, okay, we have a good chance of making the right choice in these 100 different scenarios that could take place in the race, and this is our sort of protocol for each situation.
Yeah.
And but like they so consistently get it wrong.
Dude, it's
So
abysmal. Like any time that there's that kind of situation going on, I think everyone's immediate image that pops in their head is the Ferrari clown pit wall meme. If you know what I'm talking
yeah,
about,
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah, yeah,
immediately. Like
yeah.
it's just not, it's iconic at this point, right? I will say the other thing
I
people
feel
aren't
like I see it
considering when
every
looking
week
at
on
that.
Twitter, just about.
Oh, it's every race weekend. Like there's
Yeah,
always something to just complain about with Ferrari strategy, or even question if they do know what strategy is. But I think the other people are maybe not looking over so much. Well, they're looking at it one way with how Carlos got screwed by the FIA panel, giving him the 15 place grid penalty for the repairs that needed to be made to his car for a wreck that was the track's fault, and everyone knew it was the track's fault, but yet they still put the penalty on. And here's the funny thing: Mercedes was battling Ferrari for P2 in the championship, which they eventually won. And this race really allowed them to get back into the picture to some degree, or at least not be as far behind as they would have been, because I think Leclerc still outscored both the Mercedes because they were having a tough time. But still, if you have Carlos actually in the in the fight for the lead, it could have put them out of reach going into the final race in regards to Ferrari and Mercedes. But if you have in regards to that battle for the lead, I think if you have an even 2-on-2 at that track with how well Leclerc was doing and how well Carlos was doing, man, dude, I mean, I think Ferrari could have actually won that whole thing and do
yeah,
a
it could have been
1-2.
a very different situation for sure. So yeah, if you
Because Red Bull
assume,
had the advantage of being able to leave one guy in and keep one out, and I think Ferrari knew that, so they just had to play
Mhm.
it safe and be like, we can't let one of these guys get past us and the other get the tire advantage if we come in. So I don't know if that's what was running through their mind, but I think I guess long story long, I think if Carlos is up there up front and able to kind of prevent a Red Bull sandwich threat, then
and then
maybe Ferrari does something different. I mean, what do you think?
yeah, then maybe Leclerc could go get new tires, and then they would be able to have one out and defend. Um,
Yeah, maintain track position or something like that. Come in like a lap or two later. I don't know.
yeah, and that's the thing. Like we don't know. Like they could be getting themselves sort of into, and I guess they didn't really get themselves into that situation with Carlos's car, but you know they've been getting into these tight scenarios, and it comes down to kind of a 50-50 sort of this or that scenario, and they it might seem like they're picking wrong in the moment, but suppose he comes in, now they can take off and get a bigger lead. He comes in with new tires, but it doesn't matter at that point. So,
Mm,
yeah, I don't know. It's tough to say. I think
yeah,
that it's very obvious though they've gotten screwed over one way or another quite a few times, and again it is so consistent.
I
And
you've got to wonder how many toes they've got left on their feet now from shooting themselves in the foot.
yeah,
It's just it's abysmal.
well, another way to look at it too is it might be that everybody's kind of come to expect it now, and so anytime something like crappy happens to Ferrari, everybody's like, "Oh, the clown meme,"
Yep, immediately.
and there's probably a lot of other teams that just don't have that. One the thing is too is Ferrari's held to such a high standard, because
Hmm.
they're Ferrari, and so it's kind of like Alabama. Like if Alabama loses a game, Alabama football, if they lose a game, it's like, how is that even possible? They're
Yep.
held to a high standard, and so whenever they do anything that's not optimal, then people tend to criticize them for it. But maybe it's just that they're a third place team and they are known for being a first place team. and they're just kind of doing third place. They're doing C-level activities. They're doing C-grade activities.
No, I
Yeah.
think you hit it right on the head. I think my favorite analogy in the entire sports world is Ferrari is the Dallas Cowboys of F1. They were
100%.
great 20 years ago.
Yeah.
They're pretty mid right now, but they
Yeah.
carry the reputation of they should be great every
Yep.
year, no matter what the conditions are, right? When they had a crap car in 2020 and Sebastian Vettel was on the way out, everyone was like, why aren't they winning races? Why is it only Red Bull and Mercedes at the front? And we're like, okay, well, their power unit is trash, dude.
Yeah.
That thing could barely haul them up the climb of a Rouge for it was basically a tractor. So
Yeah.
it's it's just funny, dude, because it's the parallels. It's so funny
Yeah, and
between them and the Cowboys.
maybe they're not exactly Alabama football because they've been winning, obviously. Maybe they're more like, I don't even know if this counts really either because now they're winning too. Maybe they're more like the Longhorns. Everybody thinks they're back every season and then and then they're not.
Yeah, and
They're kind of
unfortunately,
back though. They're kind of back right
look,
now.
they're back enough to be in the playoff. I mean, you
Yeah.
got to give them props. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm still horns down always as an Aggie,
Yeah.
but I mean, I got to tip my cap in regards to them actually getting to the playoff.
Yeah. I mean, you can't deny it. So
Yeah, I wish I could. If I could, I would. So
yeah, but that's my take on it.
well, then I guess to wrap this kind of section up, I think it's. Do we agree that the two best races of the year were between Singapore and Las Vegas?
I would say so. Yeah, I would definitely say.
And if so, which
Yeah.
was your favorite between those two?
I have to pick Las Vegas. Have to.
Same here.
Yeah.
Because with Singapore, what made it exciting was there was a new winner, right? And that it came down to Mercedes going with a crazy strategy to get fresh tires on those guys and coming back down under that virtual safety car, whatever it was, coming down from a 12 or 13-second gap, and then Carlos Sainz slowing himself down to allow Lando to get in the tow and into DRS to use that to defend, and then George Russell bends it, which was hilarious. And not enough time left after that for Lewis Hamilton to try something. So it was very climactic, but it was all about like the chase, right? Whereas in Las Vegas, we had 4 lead changes. So I prefer the actual on-track action, even if it doesn't come down to the last lap. But we still had Leclerc, doing a last lap pass, which is freaking awesome. That dive bomb on Checo on the last lap was phenomenal.
Oh, yeah. Incredible.
The definition of late braking. Like, I don't even think Daniel Ricciardo, the king of late braking, could do better than that.
No, yeah. I mean, 100%.
So, yeah. Obviously, Abu Dhabi happened, and it was kind of what everyone expected. Max goes off with it. Leclerc gave him a run for his money for a lap and a half, and then after that, Max just dusted him. Ferrari lost the battle with Mercedes for P2 in the constructors. Carlos probably had his worst race of the season, at least within debate. And closing out the season, I mean, we've got to go over this because I'm not sure if we'll see a season like this again, especially as Mercedes starts to get more of their technical competence back in regards to their car design. I think they'll be more competitive next year, but we'll get into that later in the episode. Talking about Max's record-breaking season, I'll go over all the records in just a second, but I think the biggest one to me is that he scored 575 out of 620 available maximum points on the season. So of all the points he could have scored, he literally scored 92% of the maximum amount. That's
incredible.
That's beating his own record too. His previous record was like 454, I believe, and the previous record before that was Lewis Hamilton with 412, I believe. I mean, that's a level of dominance I don't think we've seen in regards to. Sorry, what'd you say?
413, 2019.
That's what it was.
Lewis Hamilton.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
I got you.
Have we seen? Yeah, there we go. I appreciate it. Do you think?
Absolutely.
Do you think we've seen? I mean, how much? Here's my question for you. We've seen Max's dominance this season in that Red Bull car.
Yeah.
And all the Sky Sports guys who I will admit, no, I'm not going to say admit. It's just a fact that they have biases to certain teams. Mercedes,
Mhm.
um, especially over the 5 years ago, and especially in 2021. No, they're not terrible, but it's just there's video out there, and there's just they have their biases from time to time. I think they overall do a good job, but the narrative with especially this year's Red Bull car is that it's the most dominant car ever created. And while I do admit Red Bull had the best car, but my argument to the Red Bull car from this year being the most dominant is okay. You look at the average finishing position for Max, and the results for Max are there, right? And look, sometimes he finished 20 seconds ahead of the whole field, right?
Mhm.
But I'm thinking back to 2020 and 2019 with the Mercedes, where the only two dudes, even on the freaking lead lap, sorry, three dudes that were usually on the lead lap, especially in 2020, was the two Mercedes, right? It was always a Hamilton P1 and a Valtteri Bottas 1-2, and maybe 10% of the time they flip flop, and then 1% of the time we get a one-off Max win because Max is the only other car that can stay on the lead lap and stay within 10 seconds of the front two cars, right?
Yeah.
And I think back to that where the top three or really the top two are lapping the field with 2/3 of the race left to go. That to me was the more dominant car, especially when you look at where Valtteri Bottas finished in his average finishing position is much higher than Checo's was. You look at the qualifying
Yeah.
results, you look at Checo's qualifying results from this year, they're much lower. And his finishes were way more sporadic too. I mean, this is a guy that missed out on Q3 for like 9 races in a row or something like that. I forget what the exact number was, but he went on a stretch where he could not qualify well in that car and would have to go on these miracle drives to even get on the podium. And this is also a guy that's getting, that got beat in Brazil and got beat in Las Vegas with last lap passes and stuff like that. And, yes, Checo had his mental struggles this season, but I would argue that Checo Perez is a better driver than Valtteri Bottas, especially in the race. I think Valtteri can sometimes be a masterful driver in quality, but I would give the edge to Checo, and I'm open to your argument on this if you defer. But anywho, I think if you just compare the results of both the average finishing position of both drivers in the cars between the 2020 and 2019 Mercedes, whichever season you want to pick, and then this year's Red Bull, I would say that Mercedes has a way bigger gap of dominance than this year's Red Bull. Is that fair to say, or do you think no that this year's Red Bull is the most dominant car of all time?
So you're saying this is a more of Max being a better driver than it is a Red Bull being the better car situation.
I, I think the better
Although
car.
they both lay into it for sure. They both play
Yeah,
in.
so I think Red Bull still had the best car of the season, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But I don't think the gap of what the car's doing is as much as what it was with the Mercedes, just from the numbers in regards to how's the second driver doing, right?
Yeah. I think you might be. I think I might have to agree with that. I'll give a counterpoint though, just
Mm-hmm.
because for the sake of conversation.
That's what you're here for.
Yeah. Okay. It could also be, and you can kind of take this one way or another. There could be I'm going to say two factors that might be playing in. First, team orders situation, where we might be in a spot where maybe Checo could be pushing, but he's not going to because it's not necessary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's getting gapped by a lot more just because there's no reason, And however, I'll counterpoint my own counterpoint. You would think he would do better in qualifying, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not racing anybody at that point. You're just qualifying. It's just you versus you, really. So, yeah, I would say maybe there's some team orders going on and he's a little bit more compliant and he's like, okay, whatever, I'm not even going to. And with how good Max is, he's like, I know even if I try and go against team orders, like I am the number 2 guy. Like I'm not faster, right? And then the other thing I was thinking is it could be a driver melding with the car situation too, where this car is more set up for Max's driving style. And so yeah, it's a progressively better car, but it's a progressively better car for Max. Does that make sense? Does that make
Well,
sense?
yeah, and especially with the car suiting Max's driver style, there's no way you can get around that it does, right?
Yeah.
What I will say is I think it's a very similar situation to what we've seen with Lando and now even Oscar Piastri in his rookie year with Formula One, in because of the fact that when Max came in as a rookie and it so quickly got to the Red Bull car. Red Bull makes and there's a really cool interview you can find on YouTube where Alex Albon kind of explains his time at Red Bull and um, almost kind of like challenges the fact that Checo's done no better than he has. And in 2021, in 2020, everyone was complaining about how Albon was struggling in qualifying and even sometimes in the race. And the stats are pretty crazy, dude. Um, it's not that much of a difference between what Albon was doing in a worse car versus what Checo's done in a better car, mainly this season. 2021, he had a better run with it, but um,
Yeah, I didn't
Albon
think
makes a
Albon,
fair argument.
and whenever that he was racing for Red Bull, he wasn't doing that bad. It's just he was expected to be getting second place every race. So
Yeah.
whenever you're on that team that's it's championship or nothing,
Mm.
then
Well, and
it
especially in
makes it
that
seem
season of
like he's not doing so
2020,
good.
Max needed a guy up. The Red Bull needed a second car to help them battle Mercedes because Max could take it
Right.
to the two Mercedes. But when you get put in a Mercedes sandwich and one of those guys can undercut, the other can overcut, there's just nothing you can do, right?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
gonna get taken advantage of, you're gonna get put in a bad spot. And when your second driver isn't there to cover off those kinds of moves in regards to pit strategies, and Albon a lot of times wasn't,
Yeah.
then that's a huge problem. They saw it as a huge problem, and them swapping in Perez got Perez to that position in 2020, and it worked. But now we're seeing Perez have the same problems in his second year that Albon had in his first full year in 2020, but there isn't a championship with another competitor, another manufacturer like Mercedes on the line. It's because Max is just so far out ahead. So
Yeah.
he's not getting that narrative so much. The narrative was just like, man, Sergio's just struggling, right?
Yeah.
He
And he's
almost
still second in the
lost P2
points.
to Lewis Hamilton.
Right. Yeah.
So
He still got it though. But yeah,
mhm.
I don't know. It's weird how the optics change whenever they're how depending how Max is doing. And
But yeah,
obviously this season,
go ahead.
obviously this season, like championship secured a while ago, you know,
Yeah, very
and
early.
so it takes a lot of the attention off of analyzing the full team. But before it's like, okay, they're not going to be able to get it. Let's analyze the whole thing. It's like, well, you know,
Yeah.
Albon's not helping the situation. So
No. Yeah.
and yeah,
So I think the main thing. Sorry, I do a bad job of sometimes getting to the point, but Albon in this interview talks about how they didn't make a car. This is his argument in regards to the narrative of the car being made around Max, particularly. He's
mhm,
like they didn't make a car around Max's driving style. The only difference between that Red Bull car and any other car is that it's hypersensitive on the front, right? So tends to oversteer, very front end driven, very stiff. And Alex was like, "Yeah, I'm a guy that likes a front end driven car and a little more twitchier per se."
mhm.
And so does Max, but Max's hypersensitivity is on a different level, and he just happens to suit that unreal level of hypersensitivity and front end driven style in that kind of car. And Red Bull just found that to be their way to be the most competitive, especially when you're thinking about when they were making a car in 2019 and 2020, trying to find any way to compete with that Mercedes. Um, and I think with Max, he's had so much time at a ridiculously young age when your driving style is way more adaptable in that kind of car that I think he has such an advantage in dealing with that type of hypersensitive car than anybody else that's thrown in there. I think the only other guy that could adapt quicker than Checo did in 2021 would be Daniel Ricciardo, because he's just the only other guy that has that kind of experience, right?
Yeah, and
With
I
that
think
kind of a hypersensitive car.
I want to say he likes the same kind of car as well, doesn't he? A car that's more tendency to oversteer than understeer. I want to say
I think so.
that's how, because he
And
always
you
likes
think
to
about where
drift.
he's won, like his big Monaco win several years ago, right?
Yeah.
Um, you know that he's in a Red Bull that was able to be so competitive on that track because of how well it cornered, especially on entry, right?
Hmm.
So you know, I think he suits that well. I don't think any other driver on the grid of 20 is as accustomed to such a hypersensitive car as Max is. And I'm not sure if anyone ever will be. The only other person I think that could be is maybe Lando, because it's still a mystery to me what is so special about that McLaren car, because we all know that their McLaren runs their cars so different than the rest, to the point that Carlos Sainz warned Daniel Ricciardo on his way. And he's like, "Hey, look, this is just a different car. Just behaves way differently. You're gonna have to do some homework on this." And we just found out that Ricciardo's driving style did not mesh with that McLaren. He had his
Yeah.
bright spots, but overall did not just did not pan out. So, I think McLaren and Red Bull, for the sake of competitiveness, they just make a car that is competitive, but definitely unique. And I think it doesn't fit everybody. And it's definitely interesting to look at.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, so I don't know. It maybe, it's kind of a combination of the two, that it's not just a great car, but Max is, I mean, you can't take it away from him, dude. He's an incredible driver. Like, no question about it.
Unreal. Yeah,
And yeah, I think,
you look at his season records, right? Just from this single season alone, a lot of these records are ones he's broken from his previous season. I'll just recap them all quick and I'll let you kind of go back to your recap here. Um, all the records that he established in this season, 2023, most wins, of which he had 19, most podiums in a single season, he had 21, most points in a single season, he had 575, most laps led, he had 1,003 laps led this season. Percentage of laps led, 75.7% of the laps this season he led. Most wins from pole, he had 12 wins from pole. Most consecutive wins, he had 10. Most consecutive top two finishes, he had 14. Most hat tricks, which if you don't know what if for our listeners that don't know what a hat trick is, it's when you get pole position, you get the win, and you get fastest lap. I think some people also call that a grand slam. He had 6 of those this season, so he did all that in one season. So, I mean, I don't know where to leave it on that, other than just like, dad gum. I don't know if we're going to see another season like that again. For the
he's
sake of
kind
the
of
sport,
goaded.
I hope we don't.
Yeah, he's goaded.
Yeah, I don't know if that'll be broken. I just hope that for the sake of the sport, that we don't see it broken a third year in a row next season. Because even as a diehard Max fan, you want to see your driver not just racing well and winning all the time. You want to see him be pushed to his limit
Hmm.
by his teammate, or by you know competitors at different manufacturers. You want to see what he does under pressure, and what he does when somebody is threatening to take wins away from him, or how do you see him rebound from losing a race or something like that. That's why everyone loved the 2021 season, because it was so back and forth, and both drivers were just absolutely pushed to their limits between Lewis Hamilton and Max. And that's
Yeah.
also why everyone loved the first half of the 2022 season, because Leclerc and Max were just having a great time. Well, they probably weren't. They were probably both stressed.
We were having a
Um,
great time.
yeah, but we were having a fantastic time. I mean, dude, I loved Jeddah in 2022, because I was like, oh, this is so great. I mean, we watched these guys pass each other and be able to battle back a lap later, follow each other through the corners. Everything was so nice. And then, cars have kind of gone back in their development, and there's more dirty air now because they raised the ride height. I've already had a mini rant about that on this show. I just hope they start to get back in the right direction. But
Yeah.
anywho, yeah, I mean, that kind of sums up Max's incredible year. Like I said, I hope we don't see that kind of season again next year for the sake of competition. But in regards to next year, we could see one of the most like dramatic seasons, especially from the Drive to Survive perspective, amongst the midfield and really the majority of drivers, because here's the list of people's of drivers signed for 2024 whose contracts expire after the 2024 season. I'll read them off to you. Checo Perez, Fernando Alonso, Charles Leclerc, although Leclerc re-signed, I believe. Carlos Sainz, it's rumored he's going to re-sign. Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon, Alex Albon, Yuki Tsunoda, Daniel Ricciardo, Valtteri Bottas, Guan Yu Zhou, and then both Haas drivers, Nico Hulkenberg and Kevin Magnussen. And keep in mind, there's a lot of good F2 drivers knocking on the door. Teo Porcher being one of them. Teo Porcher is actually pretty mad right now because he claims that what Alfa Romeo told him, that all he had to do to get a seat for 2024 was win the F2 championship. I don't know if they just said it with like a lack of confidence or anything like that, and then the guy went and did it this year. And he's like,
oh my gosh,
where's my seat, homie? Where's my seat?
Yeah, all you got to do, just real simple, just one little thing, one simple little thing. Just win the championship. You're in.
Just something slight, right? Just something slight. And imagine the bosses at Alfa Romeo. Hey, sir, you remember when we told that young kid in our driver academy, just last year that, all he had to do to get a seat this year was to win the 24 championship, so the 2023 F2 championship. Boss in the back, just like, oh yeah, that was a great joke, dude. Yeah. Well, why? What's that? He goes, yeah, he did it.
And, yeah, this is a good lesson for him. If it wasn't in writing, it didn't happen.
Apparently so. But here's the other thing. It's not just Teo Porcher in that kind of a spot. You've got Liam Lawson, who did a great job in his fill-in for Daniel Ricciardo. He's knocking on the door too. And supposedly Red Bull have promised him a 2025 seat. And I don't know about you, I'm not the greatest mathematician, but that puts us with 5, Red Bull drivers contracted right now between Checo, Liam Lawson, Max Verstappen, Daniel Ricciardo, and Yuki Tsunoda, and 4 cars. So
yeah, that's
going to be interesting to see how that plays out. So there's rumors that with Honda signing on with Aston Martin to be their engine provider, I think, ? Or at least just be a title sponsor of theirs, moving from Red Bull to Aston Martin. I don't know if it's taking place next year or in 2025. Part of Yuki's clause in his contract is that he's with Honda. So there's a prediction that he could leave Red Bull to go to Honda at Aston Martin. But that does imply that Daddy Stroll lets Baby Stroll walk and kick rocks. And I don't know if that's going to happen. So I don't think they're going to get rid of Fernando Alonso unless Fernando's like, screw you guys, I'm going home. I'm going to go try to win the Indy 500 for the 5th time, and maybe I won't have a car that blows up on itself. We'll see. I don't know. I really don't know what's going to happen with that. But with all the contracts expiring there, I mean, we could be in for a lot of fireworks, dude. We really could.
I think so.
But speaking of contracts, the only guy that was on watch for, the hot seat, I guess, at the end of the season was a man by the name of Logan Sargent. And, it was up for debate of, hey, is Williams going to keep him or are they not? I'm pretty sure you and I were just sitting there with fingers crossed, like, okay, come on, just keep our American in there, dude. He's only been there. He got like a day and a half of testing, and he's a true rookie in the sport, and got thrown in there. Had some a lot of downs, but some ups, especially in the back half of the season. I think he showed enough development, and thank goodness he actually got the contract. So he got the extension for next year. And not to mention, he did score his first point in Austin. Now, granted, that was because 2 cars got DQ'd. But hey, if you're cheating, you're cheating. Now, I don't know if you want to call it cheating. If you're running your cars too low, you do have an advantage. So that's a fair thing to say. You've got to at least do well enough to put yourself in a position to be a benefactor, in that kind of situation. So he did well enough to put himself to where you take 2 cars off, he's right there, and got the point. Can't argue with that. So now he's signed on for next year. James Vowles has sung his praises, especially at the end of the season, and seems to be really committed in developing Logan further, and has really gone to bat for him a number of times. James Vowles, the Williams team principal, was the first guy to announce that, like, hey, you guys got to take it easy on Logan. He doesn't have the upgrades or the upgraded chassis. He's not getting them near as quick as Albon is. I'm not sure if he even got all the same upgrades that Albon got by the end of the season. But he made that public, and he didn't have to. He's going out of his way to remind people that he's like, hey, this guy only had a day and a half of testing before a full F1 season, and he's a true rookie, which we haven't seen, in a while in regards to just going straight up from F2 and not spending time as a reserve driver, sitting behind the paddock, kicking rocks and doing test drives for a full year like we see with Oscar Piastri. And, obviously he did lead, and I think he did finish atop the World Destructors Championship for most damage expenses. But I think for us Americans, it's still encouraging that the guy was able to retain his seat, and I think he still has plenty of talent. And I'll share with you some interesting statistics here, because people were really dogging a lot on his qualifying pace. Like, why can't the guy figure it out? Obviously he did have a couple of, I think he had one or two Q3 appearances, like in Las Vegas, which was great. And in Las Vegas, he would have scored points if it weren't for Williams' terrible tire degradation, and that's worth noting. I don't know what it was with that Williams, because we really hadn't seen tire degradation be that bad of a problem on a track before until we got to Las Vegas. I honestly thought he was driving a Haas for a second, because it was just abysmal. So I don't know what it was, but the Williams was expected to be a great car around that track with the long straights and everything and short corners, and it was terrible. But just worth noting, he did put together a really good full weekend there despite not getting in the points. But to go back to his qualifying, and especially against notable drivers coming up in the sport, starting with his F3 career in 2019, here are his qualifying records against other notable drivers that have come up the ranks recently. So he in 2019 he had this is only against notable drivers. He had a 5-3 out qualify win-loss record against Felipe Dragovich, 7-1 against Nattori. In 2021, he had an 8-1 record in qualifying and beating Oscar Piastri, which is crazy to think of. 7-2 record in facing Vesti, who was, I believe, second in the F2 championship this year. In 2021, he was 4-0 against Fittipaldi, 4-0 against De Groos. I'm not pronouncing that near right, and same with a couple of the last ones here. 3-0 against Chavanek, 2-0 against Yenny, and 1-0 against Simmons. In 2022, he was also 10-4 against Liam Lawson in Formula 2. So that's just all to say, and in his head-to-head qualifying records, he's had a lot of good performances. And against a lot of young notable names coming up through the ranks. A lot of those guys are very talented and are in other series or in F1 right now, like Oscar Piastri. And Liam Lawson also had a cup of tea in F1 this season. Will have a full-time seat in 2025, according to the Red Bull Driver Academy. So I get setting this question up took eons, I guess, but wanted to paint the picture. With Logan getting re-signed next year, two-part question. Do you think he becomes a more consistent point scorer, even in that Williams car? Do you think, and then number two, do you think Williams will be able to give him a car to become that kind of consistent point scorer and consistent number two driver to Alex Albon?
Well, I don't want to give anything away quite yet, but we did put together our top 10 finishing teams for next season, right? Which, again, it's totally wild out there. But based on where I have Williams coming in next season, yeah, it's going to be a good season for the kid, okay? It's going to be an incredible season. I think that Williams is really going to get things together based on hope and dreams, honestly.
I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah.
I mean, but here's the thing. When I look at someone like Williams versus Haas, like their ability to develop a car compared to someone like Haas, I would as much as I love Haas, I would much rather be a rookie with Williams than with Haas right now, because
100%.
in 2022, Haas at least started with a car that was pretty competitive. And by the time that, and it was at least somewhat every now and then a fighter's chance of getting in the points and having decent qualifying results, but terrible tire degradation. So just depended on the track if they were going to be able to last long. But basically, after the Austrian Grand Prix last year, just I think the only other time they scored points was from Kevin Magnussen having a miracle drive, staying out on old tires to get like a P7 or P8 at the U.S. Grand Prix, and that might have been the last points they scored. So just the typical Haas pattern of starting with a good car and then just not developing it at all for the rest of the season, and then just going into the season like, oh, remember that time we were like somewhat good like 6 months ago, and now we're here.
Mhm.
Let's try to not do that, and then they do that again. Well, this year they started with a pretty piss poor car that was barely even able to get like a point or two in the first couple races, and then it just got worse from there. And you would think with all the tire degradation problems they had last season that would have been the focal point for them to fix this season. And no, it's still their number one problem. I will say they did fix their straight line speed a little bit, but if you can't keep any freaking tires in the car, you could be fast in a straight line, but you have no ability to launch out of corners. So just throw the whole freaking car out the window. And it costs their tire degradation alone costs them so many points because they can qualify so well. And they have two drivers that can throw down decent laps, especially with Hulkenberg. Magnussen was somewhat inconsistent. But all that to say, you look at what Williams started with that car and, compared to where they started, how competitive they were to finish the season. Like, and especially with what Albon was able to do with their upgraded parts, like I think Williams is way better at developing a car, especially over the course of the season, right? Than someone like Haas or even Alfa Romeo for that regard, because they were kind of a non-factor for really most of the season, but especially towards the back end, in my opinion. So I'm optimistic that Williams can give him a competitive car. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think it's time to kind of go into, let's see. Oh, I will say they did change the sprint race format. This is what they've said is going to be going on, because the sprint race format is something that I don't know if they just do a line of crack before they determine how they're going to do it, but they keep changing it because they can't get it right. And it keeps getting changed every year since its existence in 2021. So apparently the team principals have backed a proposal to change the format of sprint races next season to the following. Friday, you have free practice 1 and sprint qualifying. Then Saturday, you have sprint and the race qualifying. And then Sunday, you have the race. So instead of doing the race qualifying first and then sprint qualifying and then the sprint race and then the real race, you're doing sprint qualifying, then the sprint, and then after the sprint race, you're doing race qualifying and then the race. Like, dude, I don't know about you. I'm getting so frustrated at how these guys can continue to just aim for a good target and hit the wall behind them, because this is just silly at this point. You have a working model in Formula 2 of how to make this sprint weekend format like competitive and provide a lot of overtakes, and to make the sprint meaningful and to encourage the drivers to ball out, right? In the problem with this year was that you had a lot of drivers that, everyone suffers to some extent on the sprint weekends, especially at newer tracks or with newer drivers at these tracks. You only get one free practice, right? And then afterwards you have your race qualifying. So if you didn't figure it out in FP1, your car's already in Parc Ferme. Then you're doing this weird sprint shootout. That I don't know about you. I didn't watch a single one of those except for maybe one, because they just weren't interesting to me, because they didn't have the same hype as qualifying. But they were doing this sprint race in an attempt to the separate sprint qualifying in an attempt to make it to where, everything for the sprint race is separated from Sunday's race. So it'll encourage these guys to actually make moves and whatnot,
Like it was an alternate event.
it's not like and it's not like what they were doing in 2021, where if you mess up in the sprint race, your starting grid position was then screwed up for the race, right? Because whatever finishing order you had in the sprint race, you would start that way in the real race in 2021 and 2022.
Yeah.
But so you saw some people not wanting to make moves and risk bending it and having to start from the back. So I get wanting to change it to a format that makes it like to where if they have a screw up and they lose track position, that it doesn't make it to where they don't want to make any moves, and then the sprint race is like not entertaining. You know, and that their qualifying position for the race is going to be there. But I just shake my head, dude. I mean, I want to hear your thoughts on this, because to me, I look at what F2 does, where you do your Friday qualifying, and then you have your sprint race the next day. No separate qualifying nonsense. It's just you go into the sprint race the next day on Saturday, and you do a 10-place reverse grid that allows for some changeup. You still give points to only the top 8, but you only flip the top 10 in regards to their qualifying order, so that way you don't have people trying to sandbag and just finish qualify last and then get to start from pole that way. So if you only do the top 10, like if you try to sandbag for 10th just to win the sprint race, you're kind of trying to set yourself up for the wrong thing to. It's weird. Like you're trying to set yourself up to win 8 points, basically, maybe 10. I forget what the point format is.
Yeah,
So
if you can hold that position too.
Yeah,
it's not guaranteed if you start out first, you're going to finish first.
And your qualifying order is held for the actual race on Sunday. So, like, if you do try to do that whole sandbag for 10th thing, well, that means you're starting from 10th on Sunday, where there's way more points on the line. So that keeps everybody honest. But then you're doing a reverse grid that allows for a lot of overtaking, and occasionally, like, a lot of people that are really good at driving out front and just need to get there to get some wins, or really just to shake things up. And it provides great racing. And to me, just copy paste that. So what, I don't get why they don't do that, but what are your thoughts? Do you think this will make things any better, or do you think it's be more of the same, to where sometimes the sprint race is more, the sprint race and sprint quality is more of a repeat of what we'll see in the race, and it almost kind of like takes away the shock factor, or it's just straight up boring, or I don't know. Obviously we have some sprints that are good, but it's just mixed results, and it shouldn't be, in my opinion. What are your thoughts do you like this new format? Do you like the direction sprints are going, or are you like, these guys are idiots, and you're kind of like where I'm at?
I don't know. It's kind of a sidebar. Like, I don't know. It's like a mediocre side dish on a really good steak.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, yeah, I'll eat it. I'll have a little bit. I might put it in the to-go box if I don't finish it. I'm not going to get a to-go box just for that.
Yep.
You know, like, I'm only going to get the to-go box if I got steak left over too, and I'll toss it in because I got it. Might as well. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think that this doesn't sound like it's going to make it any that much different, the change that they made. So I don't know. I would say there must be some other incentives going into their decision making on why they're doing it the way they are. Because, like you're saying, if they got a system that works and everybody likes in Formula 2, why wouldn't they do it in Formula 1? So it's got to be something. Usually it's something money related in some way, something with how the TV deal works, like it's the way it's televised. I don't know. But there's got to be some outside factor. And, maybe, his thought, maybe some of these teams have more sway that are the more, how would you say, winning teams right now in how these things get decided. And they're sitting there going, I don't want to do reverse grid. I don't want to risk our car sitting at the back of the grid and the guys trying to get all the way up to the front to win a couple extra points on this sprint race and potentially knock our car out for the weekend. And now we have all these repairs that got to be made. because the thing is, it's like, okay, well, then maybe they just go and sit in the back and they don't try that hard in the sprint race. But it's like these guys are too competitive to not race.
Mm.
You put them on the track, they're racing. End
Yep.
of story. They don't care about your car. These guys are racing. So it's got to
Unless
be
the
other
negative
factors.
race.
Yeah. And then he's not racing and he's going to destroy the car.
Yeah. If he would have got a full season, I don't know who would have won the World Destructors Championship. Him, any of the Haas cars, or Logan Sargent. Obviously, the GOAT of the World Destructors was Nicholas Latifi, but the GOAT's no longer present to just take that trophy every year. So now it's always up for grabs.
Roman Grosjean did a pretty good job at it a couple years back too. He had the single race destructor.
He definitely has that prize for life because that car.
Yeah.
I think that might be the only car that was completely totaled. And that what's left of that car is actually on display in its two different pieces at one of the F1 museums. And
that's incredible.
It's crazy, dude. Grosjean's still racing IndyCar too. He was with Andretti's team, but they let him go this season, and now he's racing with a smaller team, which I was kind of sad about because I was like, man, he was so close to getting his first win several times last season and just had terrible luck. But hopefully he's able to battle his way back. But I really thought him and the Andretti IndyCar team was kind of a perfect marriage. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. We'll see if Andretti made the right move. They signed some good guys. But anywho, let's close with this. We both have our list for the top 10 order of the Constructors' Championships for next season from our predictions, based on, as Carson kind of put it, hope and faith, and also our top 5 drivers. So which one do you want to start with? You want to start with the drivers, which may be the shorter version, or the teams?
Whichever one you think will be better. I picked my drivers. I did my teams first, and then I did my drivers in an order where I think it is feasibly still possible for both to happen, but I'm not 100%.
Okay, well, let's start with the drivers and then see if that paints the picture for the constructors then. So I'll start with the drivers and then you start with the teams. So for my top 5, I'm going to go Max again. I don't think he's going to have a massive car disadvantage. I think he'll still probably be in the best car maybe, and I don't see his game dropping. So even if other teams, as we'll get into in a second, and I think they will start to close the gap, and maybe he only gets 12 or 10 wins, I still think he'll win his 4th championship next season. That's where the trend's going, dude. I mean, you can't argue with how consistent he was this season, and to a point where you have Lewis Hamilton saying that he was a faultless driver, like basically saying that he was that Max was literally perfection at the award ceremony 2 nights ago or whatever it was. I mean, that's a lot of high praise coming from a 7-time world champion, whom took it to the last race with Max in 2021 and became bitter rivals with him. I mean, that takes a lot to come from him. So I think that's the way it's going to go out. But in P2, I actually have Lando, and I put a parenthesis next to it saying that Lando will get his first win next season. So book it, mark that down. As SpongeBob and Patrick would say, write that down. And then in P3, this is kind of more the hope and faith part of things. Fernando Alonso, I hope he gets his 33rd win next season. And then I have Lewis Hamilton P4 and Charles Leclerc P5.
Wow, that's interesting. Mine is very different.
Great. We got that content, baby.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going with one that you are not going to see coming at all. Okay,
did you put Logan Sargent P1?
No.
Okay.
I'm not that crazy. Number 1, Carlos Sainz.
Really?
I think, okay, now again, this is hopes and dreams. I'm giving you a little backstory here on what I think could potentially go down. All right, I'm thinking he goes this offseason and he starts doing some rally out there with his dad.
Okay.
Gets back to his roots. You know what I'm saying? he gets out there and he starts practicing and getting better in a non-traditional way. And he comes in swinging next year. Ferrari makes some changes. They get that car, dialed in. They stop being idiots on the strats. And I think he has a great
Now
season.
we're talking hope and faith.
Yes. A lot of hope, a lot of faith. Now, I'm not a complete idiot. I got Max Verstappen second. Okay, I think if Carlos does – if he does win, it's by a thin margin, okay? So I'm not saying he's going to walk away with this thing. Max is going to be right there second. Now,
So, coming down to the last race in Abu Dhabi, like in 2021 again.
Maybe. Maybe not to the last lap, but I would say last 3 races. I'm going to say last 3. Okay. Now, this is not just Carlos being better. This is Ferrari having a better car. So I got Leclerc in third.
Okay, fair.
4th, George Russell.
Okay.
5th, Lewis Hamilton.
Okay. So that pretty much means that Mercedes is probably looking to be the 3rd best team next year.
Well, I actually have them as 2nd best. So we can go into teams now because I think that Checo is going to continue to have a worse season. Actually, what I think is going to happen is they're going to make some changes to the rules on how the cars are set up next year to even out the playing field more so as far as the teams go. And so I think it's going to be they're going to try and handicap Red Bull. That's what I think.
Yeah. You could see that.
Yeah.
Obviously you have the 2026 regulations coming up in another 2 seasons, and then we'll have 2026 regulations, which is what everyone's kind of keeping their eyes on in regards to what they changed there, but they can still make slight regulation changes. And what I'm looking for is them to allow the teams to run the cars lower so that they can do what this newest regulation of car was meant to do and have the ride height for the car be lower, generate more downforce for the flow of the car, and that allows the cars to follow each other closer with less dirty air in the corners. That's what I'm hoping. If they make any changes, go back to that. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, go look at what the first half of the season looked like in 2022 when the cars were allowed to ride lower. Particularly the race that shows it the best is Jeddah in 2022. Go watch that race. See how Max and Charway would battle each other like that. And then go look at how things are now, or really any race in the back half of 2022. And you'll see what the car is supposed to behave like and what it was supposed to, doing what it was made to do. And then you'll see what it's like right now. And it's not terrible. It's not like what it was before, but we're just going in the wrong direction. So, But yeah, I see that as a possibility because Carlos isn't too far behind Leclerc. He's a guy that can take it to Leclerc on most days. So, but you have Leclerc you have Leclerc in P3, correct?
That's right.
So you don't see him. So hold on, give me your full top 10 for your teams.
Okay. Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren.
So hold on. So let me stop you right there. So you think that basically Checo turns into a Stroll?
Yes.
So where Max is banking in all the points, and then Checo's just a non-factor.
Correct. Because I think that the other cars are going to catch up so much that now Checo is not in presumably the best car anymore. And obviously he was, I think we can agree to some extent, in the best car this last year. And he was still not getting second place every race. Technically you think
not
about
even
it,
close.
You're on the team with the best car. There's one driver that's better than you. You should get second place every time. And yeah, he did.
And more importantly, if it weren't for Lewis Hamilton wrecking at COTA, or getting disqualified at COTA, it would have come down to that last race for P2.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that the other cars, the other teams get better. Max is in a much tighter battle with the Ferraris. And that Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, we could see that maybe flop. Maybe we see Leclerc get into first. I don't know. But with those other teams being better, I think that drops Checo down a good bit further, and yeah, bumps Mercedes down to third. I mean, sorry,
Okay,
Red Bull down
fair.
to third, which would be wild. Now
Yeah.
we're only getting started. Okay,
Yeah. Okay. So
we got
P4
Red Bull
onwards. Okay.
McLaren,
Okay.
not that crazy, obviously.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
This is where it gets wild, though.
Okay.
Williams.
I don't think that's a stretch. Williams P5.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's a terrible stretch. Because I
Okay.
think they can develop a car better than Alpine.
Next, Aston Martin,
Yep.
Alfa Romeo,
Mm-hmm. They'll be Sauber next year, but the same thing.
Alpine, AlphaTauri, and Haas. Sorry, Haas is last.
No,
I know.
I-
It's gonna take a lot.
it's a miracle. Yep.
Yeah.
It's
Hopes
gonna-
and dreams
it's
will be
gonna
putting
miracle.
them anywhere higher than 10. Okay.
They just can't develop a car, dude. They just can't. They can occasionally make a good one to start, but they just can't develop one over the course of a season.
It's
Ever.
the,
They've
it's
never-
the
they've never
mid-season
proven they can do that.
development that, yeah.
I don't know if they need to like look at their wind tunnel and make sure they're not actually just putting their car inside of like a cave in the side of a mountain and just having some guy just turn on a fan, because that's the only explanation to where I can see how they're failing to develop a car in the middle of a season to this extent. Like,
Yeah.
it's to the point where Haas upgrades is an oxymoron.
Well, and the other teams are upgrading so much better as well. Like, it might be that they're doing some, but it's just not enough,
Yep.
Like, it's just not enough. I don't know.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know, dude. So my top 10, I've got Red Bull at first in the constructors, and I think there's two things on here that are the most predictable to be subject to change, and that could be one of them, because you could just see Checo fall off and Max still maybe win, maybe even in a semi-dominant way, but I could see Checo falling off to where it could be like 2021, where Max won the championship, but someone else like a Mercedes gets to constructors. So
yeah, very possible.
you never know. But P2, I got McLaren.
Mm.
You look at how those guys developed a really crappy car to the point where, like, before we even got to testing in Bahrain, Zach Brown was like, "Look, we've kind of they literally like undid they uncovered the car and showed it, and he's up there supposed to give him like the big old rah speech, and he kind of had his tail between his legs, and he was like, yeah, we're still working out the kinks on this year's car. It's been a little difficult, but we're gonna fight." And I'm like, dude, you're kind of already talking like an underdog, and we haven't even gotten to testing yet. What kind of demons are in this car, dude? Like, and we saw it. Like, it was bad to start the season. They basically brought enough upgrades to where it was a B spec car in their first rounds of upgrades, which came, I think, in the fourth race, maybe the third race. I don't know, but they took it from that to a car that was fighting for podiums in the back half of the season and scoring points consistently. And I think did they finish P5 or P4 in the constructors? Can you fact check me on that?
Fourth. Yeah.
Okay.
By a solid margin, too. They beat Aston Martin by 22 points. Not bad.
Yeah. And now part of that was Aston Martin kind of pulled a Haas in the middle of the season. And when they brought in those upgrades after Canada, that Alonso was like, when we get upgrades on this car, we're going to smash the competition. It's not even going to be close. And they actually went backwards. Those upgrades were downgrades. And believe it or not, the way they improved the back end of the season in those last 5-6 races was they just put the old parts back on, or something similar to the old parts back on.
Yeah, I mean, the beginning of the season, it looked like Aston Martin might be a contender for like second or third. And it did not pan out that way by any means.
Yeah, I mean, you went from Alonso being like 1,000th of a second away from getting pole and winning Monaco to Alonso fighting for like P9 or P8 at Monza.
Yeah.
Like just fighting for his life. And then Stroll's is nowhere to be found. He's off screwing around with Haas and Williams having a play date. And it was just really weird. to see that level of a drop off. But as a
Mhm.
Haas fan, it wasn't too shocking for me to just see that that's a possibility. The only shocking part was it was Aston Martin. But
Yeah, very feasible.
yeah, so moving onwards to finish out my top 10, I've got Mercedes third, Ferrari fourth, Aston Martin fifth, Williams at six. So we have our fifth and sixth flip flopped.
Yeah, not
This is
far
where the
off.
hope and dreams really come in. Haas P7,
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
Alpine eighth,
Okay.
Racing Bulls, which I think is a terrible name change for AlphaTauri, P9, and that one was kind of just out of spite because I didn't like the Racing Bulls thing. I don't know.
It's so similar to Red Bull. It's like a Walmart Red Bull.
I mean, it's look at this point. At this point, just call it sugar-free Red Bull because it looks
Yeah.
exactly like the sugar-free Red Bull can.
Oh, that's
Just
funny.
come on. And then 10th, I have Sauber, which is Alfa Romeo from this year. For audience members that don't know, Sauber is, well, they still are like the co-owners of Alfa Romeo F1, but Alfa Romeo has basically kind of sold their rights back to Sauber or something like that, and Sauber is going to be Sauber F1 for the next 2 years until it becomes Audi F1 in 2026 and onwards. So it's really weird, but I think when you have that kind of like transition going on and rebranding for a temporary team and just a team that's kind of waiting for 2026, I'm not sure how good their development is going to be for the technical side of things. I think they have two capable drivers, and I think they'll still score points, but I see them towards the bottom. Now, I could definitely see everyone on this list, with the exception of like anyone past P6, shifting up a place because Haas could absolutely be the worst team next season. That's always a possibility, right?
Yeah.
So, but I definitely think that the bottom three, excluding Haas, is going to be Alpine, Racing Bulls, and Sauber because I think those three teams struggle to develop a car. So
Yeah, I don't mind that bottom three whatsoever. I don't at all.
but I think both of our lists are showing that, we're going to have a Red Bulls, Mercedes, Mercedes powered units, and Ferrari still at the front. We're not going to have an outsider come into the top three. I could see Aston Martin getting up in there, mixing it up still.
Yeah, I mean,
but I think the main
happen.
difference is you have Ferrari up there with Red Bull, and I have McLaren.
Yeah. Which again, I've got McLaren at number 4, and I'm trying not to be, too optimistic or biased with Lando, but I would love to see McLaren get up closer to first and second or third. That'd be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that'd be great.
anything can happen, but
especially to see Lando start to duke it out more with Max. That would be fun.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
those two would be a phenomenal showing because both are great wheel-to-wheel racers.
Yeah.
Not that in 2021 Lewis Hamilton was the worst, but I think Lewis Hamilton isn't as good wheel-to-wheel as someone like Lando and Max or even Charles Leclerc in regards to avoiding contact or not causing it. But I think Lewis does have a leg up on some of those other guys, with the exception of Max in regards to his overall pace and his ability to put a weekend together. So I still give Lewis as a driver a leg up over like Charles Leclerc and for now, Lando. I think Lando has the best. Lando and Charles can definitely still jump up Hamilton in his current years. There's a potential for them to do that. But I think Lewis in his current state, his current, driving ability is still on an average weekend better overall than those two drivers. It's thin, ice thin margins we're talking here. But
yeah,
I do think in regards to wheel racing ability and the ability to stay clean, but also still remain aggressive, that walking that fine line, I give that to Charles and Lando Norris more than I would someone like Lewis. So I think a Lando or I think a Lando Max battle would be phenomenal.
Well, Lando's younger too than those guys, and I think that plays into it. I think he wants all the smoke.
For sure.
He likes the action like that. Like he likes driving that way.
Lando's always wanted the smoke. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
even when he was known as Last Lap Lando, he wanted the freaking smoke, dude.
Oh, yeah.
And it's fun to
100%.
watch.
No question.
Yeah. I think my only other crazy prediction, I mean, the only crazy predictions I have, I'll tell you what, I'll end with these two crazy predictions. I've already said one of them, that Lando will get his first win. I don't think that's even qualifying as a crazy prediction because it's trending that direction.
No, I think that's a valid prediction. I'll take that too. 100%.
Yep.
He might
Number
even get two.
two, yeah. He may even get two, especially if McLaren gets him a capable car.
Yeah.
It won't have to be
Mhm.
like a one-off win scenario like it was when he was in Russia in 2021 and almost got one. But the second crazy prediction I have is that Logan Sargent scores over the course of the whole season 10 points or more.
Once
don't know.
again, I don't think that's crazy.
I don't know. I think that one is more dependent on Williams than it is, I mean, in regards to giving him a car, than it's so much Logan, because I think maybe the crazy prediction is I think Logan will definitely close the margin of which he's behind Albon. I think Albon will still be the number one driver, but I think Logan will at least get more closer to a 1B than a definite number two driver. I'm hoping. We'll see.
Yeah.
I think it'll still be a definite, like, Alex still is number one, but I think Logan will move the needle a little bit closer.
I would agree with that. Well, and it's just seat time. He, like you said, he didn't have hardly any time at all to get ready for the season, and so now he's
Didn't
been
even
through
have
the
a
whole
full
season.
testing either.
Yeah, now he's got the off season. I think it's going to be a much different look for that Williams team this next year.
I hope so for the sake of our American. One other little thing that I want to note is for guys that don't watch F2, you need to, especially since if any of our listeners are from Houston, we've got a guy named Jack Crawford racing in F2. He was a rookie this year in F2. He got his first race win, which was awesome to see. He scored, I think, 4 podiums total, including that race win as a true rookie, and beat Arthur Leclerc, Charles Leclerc's brother, in the drivers' championship. I think he finished 11th or 10th out of the 22 drivers or something like that. And I think Arthur Leclerc finished like 12th or 13th or something like that. So he was one of the better rookies racing for High Tech, which isn't one of the best teams. They're kind of middle of the road. And now he is moving up. He's actually leaving the Red Bull Driver Academy to do this. He's moving to I don't know if they call it DAMS, but it's like DAMS, that F2 team. It's actually one of the founding original teams for F2. It's obvious that he and a couple other guys from the Red Bull Driving Academy are leaving the Red Bull Driving Academy to go to these other kinds of teams so that they have the most amount of options in regards to their route into F1.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at Red Bull's Driver Academy right now, it's freaking packed, dude. There's so much talent, and their most talented next youngest driver, Liam Lawson, had to get thrown to have a season in Super Formula and then have a cup of tea in F1 when one of their drivers freaking broke his hand, right? And that also took, before that, one of their drivers they signed from Mercedes Driving Academy to be terrible, and Nick DeVries. So Red Bull has all these young drivers in the driver academy, but they can't give them the seats to keep them moving up. So you see more guys like this leaving it when they get to F2 and then going to other teams, so they have that freedom to sign with wherever the best available seat is moving up, right? But keep your eye out on Jack Crawford. Really talented driver out of Houston, Texas. I've enjoyed watching him through his Euro Formula and Formula 3 career. And then his rookie season this year in Formula 2 was awesome to watch, and I think he did a great job. And I think he's a guy that could absolutely work his way up into the F1 grid. So it'll be exciting to watch. But if he doesn't go to the F1 grid, I think you'll absolutely see this kid at Indy someday. His goal is to go to F1, but I think if he sits around for a year or two longer than he should in F2, then you'll just see him go over to Indy and say, I'm not going to play the waiting game anymore. So, yeah, keep your eye on that. It's cool stuff. Any last crazy predictions before we wrap this one up?
Well, I could get real crazy.
Send it.
Logan Sargent gets a podium.
Oh Lord, I don't. I mean,
Let's just throw it out there, dude. Imagine it hits.
bro, imagine the memes.
Yeah.
Like, no one's gonna know what a kilometer is after that kind of race. Not a soul. Uh,
Uh,
I mean, I'd go. I think I may just do 4th of July fireworks on a random Tuesday in March if that happens. Like, I'll go crazy. I'll
yeah.
go
Well,
throw a whole gallon of sweet tea in the freaking Gulf Coast Harbor just to prove a freaking point.
I'll be there. I'm going with you.
Oh yeah, we'll do a whole
Let's do
thing.
it. Oh yeah.
Yep. But yeah, so kind of moving forward, finishing out this year. This is going to be our last F1 episode for the year. Since the season is over, we'll get back into covering F1 at the early part of next year. But between now and then, for those of you guys that haven't listened to our Supercross episodes, that is what's coming up next, and that is our for me, it depends on the day between whether I love F1 more or Supercross more. Supercross is what I grew up with. If you guys haven't watched it, I highly encourage it. It's all the action and thrills of F1, except these guys are sometimes actively looking for contact and doing block passes all the time. And some of the most insane athletes you'll see in any kind of motorsport. In my opinion, I kind of call Supercross the football of motorsports because of the amount of contact, the amount of athleticism and finesse required. So I highly encourage you guys to look into it. We will be back in another week or two as far as the motorsports episodes go to preview Anaheim 1, which is the first race of Supercross. And that race will take place on January 6th. So we're really excited for that. We've already been talking, me and Carson and I, beforehand, just looking at just what the lineup looks like in regards to the top class for the Supercross Championship this season. And like what I love about Supercross is you get to the start of a season and you look at the roster that they have, and you're like, okay, there's like half of the roster for the 22 guys or whatever on factory rides. That you have like half the field could win a race,
It's
and
a total toss up.
and a quarter of the field could win the championship, like and be a contender.
And even more
last
so
season,
in 250.
250 is just an absolute crazy. I can never predict 250 correctly with the
That's
lights
wild.
class. And last year we had a fantastic championship battle that was a 3-way championship battle between Eli Tomac, Cooper Webb, and Chase Sexton. And I think we're going to get even more of that craziness this year. So yeah, highly encourage you guys to listen to that episode when we record it in about another week or so. And if you haven't watched Supercross before, start researching it, get into it. For me and a lot of my friends, that's how we that's how we are able to get through the absence of F1. But I feel if you get into it enough, especially at the start of the season, you won't be missing F1. You'll be encapsulated. So, anywho, appreciate you guys listening if you made it this far. And like I said, we'll be back with more F1 at the start of early next year in January. When we get some more moves going on when it comes to team developments and we get closer to car reveals and stuff like that. But for now, this will be our last F1 episode of the year. And we'll go ahead and sign off, and we'll see you guys on next week to talk about Supercross. So appreciate you guys listening and signing off.
Adios.